With an infinite amount of choices comes an even greater amount of possibilities. One moment may change the course of history forever. But do the choices we make influence the world around us? And in what ways do we help or hurt those in our lives due to those decisions? The old examples hold true even today, and the modern ones paint an easier picture to follow for application in our day-to-day living. We'll examine these to gather a greater understanding of how everything else changes due to one moment in the story.
In Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, the reader follows two prominent characters, George and Lennie. They're good friends who are just looking for work to keep things going, although Lennie has suffered through life with many severe mental problems, and George has been his best friend and mentor throughout the story. Lennie's fixation on shiny and soft things is a poor match with his incredible strength, so George tries his best to keep him away from anything delicate or alive. The only woman character in the story, simply named Curley's wife, attempts to seduce Lennie and manipulate him in solitude. After being attracted to her hair and requesting to feel it, the big guy was startled when she screams at him to let her go. The result was nothing less of a catastrophe, saying, "And she continued to struggle, and her eyes were wild with terror. He shook her then, and he was angry with her, and her body flopped like a fish. And then she was still, for Lennie had broken her neck." Of course, this event startled Lennie, for he knew from this moment forward things were never going to be the same. After he runs off, George and the others at the farm find her body, and he comes to the realization that Lennie is now a killer, and he too must kill to prevent him from hurting other people. "I just done it," George said tiredly. "Did he have my gun?" "Yeah, he had your gun." "And you got it away from him and he took it and you killed him?" "Yeah, that's how." After the so-called deed is done, George is left with two people dead and is also scarred for life. Because of Lennie's violent and sudden act, Curley's wife, George, and Lennie himself are all affected in negative ways.
Kennedy was a very important person in the modern world. When he died, it was one moment would change everything. In the article How Did Kennedy's Assassination Change the World, author Tony Badger writes, Kennedy's assassination and Johnson's masterly leadership guaranteed the eventual passage of the Civil Rights Bill and the tax cut. This shows the effect that Kennedy had on the Civil Rights Bill and the tax cut. Civil rights was one of the biggest things during the time of Kennedy, and the fact that Kennedy was pushing to get it passed was a big deal. And when he died, it changed how this bill was going to get treated. In the same article it states, but Kennedy's death did put an end to third-party efforts to normalize relations with Cuba. Kennedy might have gone on to reorient policy towards China. Would he have avoided the Vietnam disaster? Kennedy was on track to solve relations with Cuba, and maybe even China. Although, since he was assassinated, it changed the way people wanted to move forward in America. Even though his death inspired people to pass the Civil Rights Act, there was no movement in direction of amends with Cuba. So many outcomes with so many effects resulted from one man's death, both positive and negative. This further shows a variation in outcomes from the seed of one moment.
The poem The Unknown, written by Edgar Lee Masters, is a depressing yet very real interpretation on how one choice changes the perspective one has over another. It reads, "As a boy reckless and wanton, wandering with gun in my hand through the forest near the mansion of Aaron Hatfield, I shot a hawk perched on the top of a dead tree." The author then continues with, "Then I put him in a cage where he lived many days, cawing angrily at me when I offered him food." This is a rather gloomy depiction of desire. It is not revealed to the reader he longs for a hawk until the shot was fired. After that, even the recipient of the text would hate him for his ignorance without question. It ends off with, "Daily I search the realms of Hades for the soul of the hawk, that I may offer him the friendship of one whom life wounded and caged." Because of that one shot, a hawk is directly physically harmed, but the man indirectly experiences sadness and mourns the opportunities they could have had together. In this moment, that ripples an array of pain and negative consequence.
In Macbeth, the character Macbeth has been told by supernatural witches that he is destined to be king, which motivates him to want to kill King Duncan and take his place on the throne. When thinking of this act, Macbeth asks himself, "Is this a dagger I see before me, the handle toward my hand?" This quote both shows Macbeth's character as a not entirely evil man and foreshadows the event to come. His doubt in killing Duncan at first makes the act even more treacherous for the audience, and he debated doing the right thing and didn't keep on that path. His wife, Lady Macbeth, was the primary source of this idea of falsely acquiring power, seeding the plan into her husband's head. After he pulls through with killing Duncan, she regrets her efforts to push him over the limit and is overrun by grief. By the end of the story, she ends up committing suicide. The Queen, my lord, is dead. Her death was a direct response to the murder of the king, an act of which both twisted a fairly sane man to death and ended the lives of Lady Macbeth and Duncan himself.
The theme of one moment changing the course of history is evident in all of these texts. Because of Lennie's condition and the death of Curley's wife, he too will be killed by George, who lives now scarred for life. John F. Kennedy's assassination, though horrible, inspired the hope to spawn the Civil Rights Act, but could not fully inspire others to mend the U.S.-Cuba relationship. The man in the unknown lives with good intentions, but cripples a desired pet by approaching him recklessly. Because of his mistake, he chases after the possibility of healing, although the hawk's anger makes their fate more than finite. Lastly, Macbeth's selfish choice to kill King Duncan drove him mad, ending his life and ultimately his wife's. These many outcomes were directly born from one thing, and even those outcomes had outcomes of their own. But these are further proof as to why moments add up beyond the human comprehension, and humanity needs to take each second into thought.